Camping, the recreational activity in which participants take temporary residence outdoors, usually in tents specifically designed or adapted for their situation. Camping was once a rough, back to nature pastime, but it later became a standardized method for holidays across the world. While we begin to look at the history of camping, we can discover that Thomas Ram was the first pioneer of modern camping. He wrote actually the Camper's Handybook, which was published in 1908. He discussed many different techniques, and while he discussed techniques, he also discussed his urge to actually go camping. So his urge came from when he was a boy traveling across the United States on a train in 1853. He would later use methods like biking for his camping expeditions and would continue to write books as he would become more familiar with the activity. Um, he later founded the first camping club actually in the world in 1901 in the States. Sorry, not in the States, in Great Britain. He later merged clubs to form the Camping Club of Great Britain and Ireland. So in Europe, Robert Falcon Scott would later become the camp's first president in 1909. Interesting fact about Robert Falcon Scott is that he was the first very famous Arctic explorer. He would use many different clubs after began to create these clubs in accordance to their geographical location. Many of these clubs started arising in the United States, and as close as the Adirondack Mountains Club in 1922, also the Sierra Club in 1892. However, the scale of camping did not develop after the Second World War. Motorized vehicles helping camping expand more than ever before after the war. While camping is seen as a very individualistic hobby, it's very interesting to understand that there is actually many different types of camping, depending on what kind of person you are and if you have a family or not. So the most basic popular type of camping is of course the one that everyone tends to think of, which is tent camping. This is when you're sleeping in a tent, and next up we have RV or van camping. This is a much more accessible sort of camping. This is good for people who want to travel and see a lot more of the country that they're in, and it allows for an easier transportation of your dwelling. Also backpacking, this is more rough. This is if you're hiking and you have all your gear in your bag, and you really are limited to the stuff in your bag, and you don't tend to usually have any types of transportation. Next up, we have survival camping. This is even more extreme, to where you're living actually off the land. You don't tend to bring much stuff from home to help you survive out in the wilderness. You tend to usually, again, try and survive off the land. That means hunting, making your own shelter. It's very, very bare bones. Also, we have another car camping. This is, of course, a millennial type of camping. Makes it easier and more accessible to, of course, travel and have a more have an easier place to sleep and not worry about setting up tents. Obviously, very trendy among social media. You also have glamping, which is another type of camping where it's more I wouldn't call it camping, but it's having the luxuries of home while you're out in the wilderness, and usual accommodations are you have a canopy or a treehouse, and it's already set up for you with the luxuries of home. Also, we have kayak slash canoe camping. This is where you access the land by water, so you are limited to kayaking and canoeing to get to your destinations. Usually, you have to walk through plateaus in order to cross certain landmarks. But usually, most of the land where you're able to camp is only accessible by water. So, yeah, that's your transportation. You also have a rooftop camping where certain vehicles will allow you to actually camp on top of your vehicle. Obviously, a way more simpler method than just regular camping. Also, a more extreme one would be winter camping. This is this is interesting because winter camping, not only is it to in order to camp in the winter, but also it's used on various trekking expeditions, such as hiking Mount Everest and hiking very high mountain ranges. Due to the extreme cold weather, you will need to have tents and shelters to take the weather. Also, you have many more types of camping, but you have RVing, so obviously it's a motorhome with the luxuries of home. This makes it a lot more simpler to travel around like any other camping method with vehicles. As time progressed in the hobby of camping, so did many of the equipment needed to actually go out and camp. There was many progression in the actual material and the actual tents you could use, while fabric, such as polymer, made it a lot easier to carry around tents for the weight. Also, aluminum like rods and stuff to hold up the structure of the tent became much more light and accessible, so that you could carry it around with you, and you didn't have to really make your own tent or your own shelter when you did get to wherever you were sleeping or wherever your destination was. Later on, we did begin to see more comforts of camping, more luxurious equipment begin to emerge for the hobby, such as, as you could see in the photo, many different types of knives and equipment that you could use to help survive off the land. The pocket knife really does stand out as there's many different tools on that. Also, you have things as gas burners, so you have propane tanks that will help you basically have the luxury of having a stove with you to boil water and to help you cook things. Also, you have bags such as you have bags that will allow you to carry a lot more equipment than you would with just traditional bags. You had flashlights, also boots, many different types of equipment, electrical equipment like walkie-talkies that will allow you to be safe or connect with friends that are nearby that are doing the same thing. A lot of technology did arise. A lot of them today are, as opposed to when it had began camping, very luxurious. The manufacturing process of materials for tents and also for things such as sleeping bags are usually the manufacturing process is fabric pieces are cut in different shapes, including zippers and all details for that certain model, until they're passed on to sewers. These materials are usually very light, but depending on the circumstance, they could also be heavy if you are looking for a more, let's say, a warmer sleeping bag or a more insulated tent. Material density can vary. There's also They're usually certified and approved by the country, by the company, so that the consumer isn't put in danger. Many tent brands like North Face and Mountain Equipment Co-op really do have a very high standard of manufacturing for these products, as it does correlate with safety for the consumer. So here, this component of the project, we are looking at the components of tents. Um, Tents are very diverse. Many tents tend to have different types of components. But here we're going to talk about the most most simple components. So here we have an outer tent, or a rain fly. This is to protect the actual tent from things such as rain and general leaves and whatnot. These are sold either single wall or double wall tents. So typically a bigger tent that require these rain flies. Um, the inner tent, or the tent body, this is the actual tent that make up the shape. Um, they and what make up the shape also are tent poles. This is the actual structure of the tent, in which holds up all the fabric. These tent poles, you could see them as basically the foundation of the tent. You also have the floor, the tub floor. This is usually a waterproof floor to keep any moisture out. Um, so we have pegs too. So pegs are very important in order to secure the tent to the ground. Often when you're camping, you aren't on solid ground. You're on very uneven ground. So having pegs is very important. Ropes also can be used to secure and make up that shape of the tent, and to help again secure the tent. You have storage pockets in many of these tents as well. That's more of a luxury feature, as we see in later developments in the tent. We also have meshes, so of course to keep the bugs out, and that's basically the most basic components of a tent. While we begin to look at the comfort and efficiency of certain tents, it's important to understand that now, yeah, being efficient is a very big part of camping. So you do tend to find a lot of models that do cater to efficiency, such as you could find tents now that fit in your coat pocket. Obviously, these are not the most insulated tents, but they do make it very efficient to carry around. Tents such as bags that you could carry on your back, so that it is easier to be mobile while you are looking for a place for shelter. Zippers also make it very efficient for some campers, as the zipper is very diverse in which way it could be used. Zippers can be used to put away the tent in a bag, so some tents actually are a bag and a tent at the same time, but zippers allow it to actually be made into a bag or a tent. Depends in which way the user wants it to be made. But yeah, efficiency is definitely one of the most important features when you are looking at camping, and especially certain types of camping, like when you're going on expeditions. You really don't want your tent holding you back. Sizes for tents and general equipment for camping are very diverse, as it has become a very family oriented hobby. Depending on which type of camping could also be a factor in what sizes tents come in. Of course, if you're a bigger family, you could find sizes of tents that could hold up to 12 people. Also, if you're more on an expedition, you could also find tents that hold only one person. It really depends on what use you're trying to get out of the certain equipment you're using. Also, Sleeping bags and general equipment also are very diverse from what they are used for. Sleeping bags usually